Okay, y'all, stop everything you are doing right now, because what happened this week in Queens is probably the boldest, most dangerous, most unbelievable move I have ever seen a rapper make in my entire life, and I am not exaggerating even a little bit. 50 Cent just walked back into the one neighborhood on this planet where people publicly said he would leave in a body bag. Not at night, not with a disguise, not with a police escort shutting down the block. In broad daylight, y'all, smiling, laughing, handing out $100 bills on the exact same corner where they swore on everything they love that he would never stand again. And I need everybody to hear me when I say this next part, because this is the part that gave me chills. Nothing happened. Nothing. And if you know anything about Southside Jamaica, Queens, then you know that silence is never just silence. Now, before we get into all of this, because baby, this story has layers on top of layers, let me make something very clear up front. What I am about to walk y'all through is not gossip, it is not a fan theory, and it is not something somebody's cousin posted on a message board. Every single piece of this story is on camera, on record, or sitting inside actual court documents. 50 Cent really did go back to his old hood with Tony Yayo by his side. They really did hand out money and order food for the whole community. The threats against him really were made out in the open for the whole world to see. And the man whose family name hangs over this entire story really is sitting in federal custody right now, reportedly begging the system for a chance to come home early and getting told no. Stay locked in with me, because by the time we are done here tonight, you are going to understand why what 50 Cent just did was not a charity visit. It was a coronation. And hold on, before anybody runs to the comments with the lazy take, let me go ahead and kill that right now. No, this was not a music video shoot. No, this was not some staged publicity moment with barricades and a production crew. This was a man, his day one brother, and the neighborhood that watched him grow up. I need y'all to keep that framing in your mind as we go, because the difference between a stunt and a statement is everything in this story. Everything. So let me set the table real quick for everybody who is new here. And even if you have been following this story for 20 years, I need you locked in anyway, because I promise you there are pieces of this you have not heard put together the way I am about to put them together. The man the whole world knows as 50 Cent was born Curtis Jackson, and he came up in Southside Jamaica, Queens, at a time when that neighborhood was run by a name that people were genuinely afraid to say out loud. That name was Supreme, and I am not going to get into every single chapter of that era tonight, because we would be here for 3 hours, but what you need to understand is this. Supreme was not just a street figure. He was the street figure, the kind of man whose organization was so deep and so feared that federal agencies spent years building cases just to take it apart. And when young Curtis Jackson started making noise in the music industry, first with a little record called How to Rob that basically poked at every big name in the game, the streets started watching him very differently. Because in that world, there is a difference between being from a neighborhood and being a problem in that neighborhood. Now y'all already know what happened next, or at least you think you do. In the year 2000, 50 Cent was shot 9 times in front of his grandmother's house. 9 times, y'all. Sit with that number for a second, because the average person does not survive one, and this man took 9, including one to the face, and he lived. And not only did he live, he turned that survival into the foundation of one of the greatest runs hip-hop has ever seen. Get Rich or Die Tryin' was not just an album title. It was a mission statement. It was the whole story compressed into 5 words. And from that moment forward, everything about 50 Cent, the music, the business moves, the television empire, all of it, traces back to that day and to that neighborhood. But here is the part that a lot of the newer fans do not fully understand. And honestly, this is where the story gets cold. The shooting was never just a shooting. The beef that followed was never really a rap beef, no matter how the media framed it at the time. Because on one side of this thing, the music was never the point. The music was just the public layer of something much older and much colder. There were investigations. There were restraining orders, including the famous one that 50 Cent's side took out, the one his enemies used for years to paint him as an informant. There were diss records that were really messages. There were interviews that were really warnings. And underneath all of it, there was a family name, Supreme's name, and the men who carried that name treated 50 Cent's survival like a debt that was still owed. And that is why, for over 2 decades now, the word on the street has been very simple and very consistent. 50 Cent cannot go back. He can have all the money in the world. He can have the hit shows, the liquor brands, the deals, the mansions. But Southside Jamaica is closed to him. That was the story. That was the one permanent stain that his enemies could always point to, no matter how high he climbed. You can hear it on podcasts. You can hear it on diss tracks. You can hear it in interviews with people who were not even there. You are banned. You are exiled. You can never stand on that corner again. Y'all, they did not just say it quietly either. This is the part that honestly disturbed me when I went back and looked at it. In recent months, and I want to be careful and accurate here because these are allegations and street reports, not convictions. Word had been circulating that after a relative of Supreme was released from custody, a young man known on these streets as Prince, the temperature around 50 Cent spiked all over again. There was talk, allegedly, of green lights, of open seasons, of people waiting for the right moment. And the things being said online were not vague. People were describing, in graphic detail, exactly what they claimed would happen to 50 Cent if he ever showed his face back home. They were saying it confidently, publicly, like it was already a done deal. I am not going to repeat the specifics of that talk here, partly out of respect and partly because it does not deserve the oxygen. But I will say this. The people making those claims were not random trolls behind anonymous accounts. These were people with documented ties. People whose words carry actual weight in that world. And that right there is what made this week's footage so stunning to everybody who has been paying attention. Because think about what we all saw. The same week that all of that talk was floating around, 50 Cent did not respond with a rant. He did not respond with a diss record. He did not send a single subliminal post. He got in a car, drove to Southside Jamaica, got out in broad daylight with Tony Yayo, and stood on the very concrete they said he could never stand on again. And then, y'all, he started handing out $100 bills. To elders. To kids. To the workers at a local restaurant that had stayed open late to feed people coming out of a show. The whole thing is on camera. The block did not react like a band man had returned. The block reacted like a son came home. And you cannot fake that. You can stage a lot of things in this business, but you cannot stage the way a neighborhood receives somebody. That reception was 26 years in the making, and every single person standing on that sidewalk knew they were watching something the doubters said was impossible. Remember that image, because we are coming back to it. Now let me talk about Prince for a second, the nephew, the one whose name has been attached to all of this alleged talk. Because his situation tells you absolutely everything you need to know about how this story actually ends for the people who choose that life. This is a young man who went into the institution with a reputation, a name, a legacy that was handed down to him, whether he asked for it or not. He went in as the next generation of a famous name. And from everything that has surfaced publicly, the years did what the years always do. The pictures that circulate now show a man aged far beyond his time. And I need y'all to understand what that means, because it is not just about a photograph. That is what that life does. It does not just take your freedom. It takes your youth. It takes your health. It takes your future. And then it hands you back a picture where you do not even recognize your own face anymore. So when people online were allegedly whispering that Prince was waiting for his moment to make a move, I need you to ask yourself a serious question. Does a man who has already paid that price, who has already watched time turn him into his own grandfather, really want to go back inside? Does any sane man who has felt that cell door close behind him ever volunteer to hear it close a second time? I do not believe it. I do not believe Prince wants any of that smoke, because the smart ones learn what the system actually is. The system is a machine that eats years and gives back nothing. And no amount of street honor, no amount of family name, no amount of old loyalty is worth feeding yourself to that machine twice. The ones who have been there know. You do the time, and then you never, ever let the time do you again. And now, y'all, here is where this story takes a turn that almost nobody saw coming. And honestly, this is the part that had me reading the reports twice, because I genuinely could not believe what I was looking at. Remember Supreme? Remember the legend, the untouchable, the man whose name was once spoken in whispers? Well, word from behind the walls right now is that the energy has completely changed. Completely. According to people who follow this case closely, the same man who once defied the government at every single turn is now allegedly doing something his old self would have found unthinkable. He is asking for mercy. Let me say that again so it lands the way it needs to land. The man who built an entire reputation on never bowing, never folding, never acknowledging the authority of any court or any system, is reportedly petitioning for leniency, for a reduced sentence, for another chance to come home. And the answer he is getting back, from everything that has been reported, is a cold, flat, immovable no. No early release, no reconsideration, no shortcut, no cheat code, no exceptions. The time is the time, and he is going to sit there and do every single day of it. Now let me break down what that leniency request really means, because some of y'all might be wondering why a man with that kind of legend would even ask in the first place. Here is the reality the streets do not put on the t-shirts. Time is undefeated. When you go into federal custody as a young lion, you tell yourself you are going to hold it down, stay solid, and come home to your empire. But baby, empires do not wait. The corners get new faces. The money finds new hands. The soldiers become grandfathers, or they become memories. And one day you wake up in a cell, and you realize the world you were king of does not exist anymore. It exists in documentaries. It exists in other people's storytelling. And it exists, and this is the part that has to burn, it exists inside the television empire of the very man you were supposed to have erased. So of course the request gets made. Of course the petitions get filed. Hope is the last thing a man loses in there. But hope is not a legal argument, and the federal government does not do nostalgia. The answer was no. And from everything being reported, the answer is going to keep being no. Do y'all see the picture that is forming here? Do you see the irony sitting right in the middle of all of this? On one side of the story, you have a man who was shot 9 times and left for dead, who turned survival into an empire, who just walked back into the neighborhood that was supposed to be off limits to him forever, smiling and handing out money like a king returning to his kingdom. And on the other side, you have the menacing empire that was supposed to have erased him, now aging behind federal walls, reportedly pleading with the very system it mocked, and being told to sit down and finish every day of that sentence. The power has not just shifted. The power has flipped completely upside down, 180 degrees, and everybody in Queens knows it. And I have to talk about Tony Yayo for a minute, because his presence in this footage is not a footnote. It is a headline all by itself. Tony Yayo is the one who went to jail at the height of G Unit's run. He is the one who came home and picked up right where he left off. He has been 10 toes down for 50 Cent through every beef, every lawsuit, every shooting, every betrayal. When you see Tony Yayo standing next to 50 Cent on that strip, you are not just looking at a hype man. You are looking at a statement about loyalty that goes back over 2 decades. You are looking at the original G Unit. The real one. Before the money, before the vitamin water deal, before the television empire. 2 men from the same mud, standing on the same mud, telling the whole world without saying a single word, we never left, and nobody could ever make us leave. And since we are talking about loyalty, let me say something about what real loyalty actually costs, because this story is full of people paying bills that other people ran up. Think about all the men over the years who caught cases, who did bids, who lost entire decades standing on promises made in somebody else's war. The old heads will tell you, the game has a 100% collection rate. It always collects. The only question is who pays. And when you lay the 2 sides of this feud side by side in the year 2026, the ledger is not even close. One side paid in cells and sentences, and gray hair, and missed funerals. The other side paid in scars. Real, physical scars. 9 of them. And then that side turned those scars into the most valuable origin story in entertainment history. That is not me glorifying anything. That is me reading the scoreboard. And the scoreboard does not care about nostalgia. Now, I already know some people are going to look at this and say it was reckless. I have seen the comments. I have seen people saying 50 Cent is playing with his life, that he is too rich and too successful to be testing the streets like this, that he has children and businesses and a whole television network to think about. And listen, I hear that. I genuinely do. There is a version of this conversation where we talk about whether a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars should ever step foot in an environment with that much history and that much unresolved tension. That is a fair conversation, and I am not dismissing it. But here is the counterargument, and honestly it is the one I keep coming back to. This is a man who got shot 9 times, survived, and then made the entire world pay attention to the story of his survival. Risk is not a bug in 50 Cent's operating system. Risk is the operating system. Every single chapter of his career, from How to Rob, to the G-Unit mixtape run, to going at the most powerful figures in the industry when everybody told him not to, has been built on doing the exact thing that fear was supposed to prevent. The moment he lets a threat dictate where he can stand, everything the brand is built on collapses. He knows that. And more importantly, the people making the threats know that he knows that. And let me also say this, because it needs to be said. What got completely lost in all the drama talk was the actual substance of what happened on that block. A local business stayed open late to serve concert goers. A neighborhood that has been through decades of disinvestment got a visit from its most famous son, who did not just wave from a car window. He pulled out money and put it directly into people's hands and directly into a local business. Kids on that block got to see somebody from their exact circumstances who made it all the way out and then came all the way back, not in fear, but in triumph. That matters, y'all. That matters more than the gossip, more than the beef, more than any of the threats. Whatever you think of 50 Cent, and people have strong opinions in every direction, the visual of a black man from Southside Jamaica standing free and generous on his own streets when the world said he could not is a powerful image. Full stop. But now let me get into the part that has everybody talking behind the scenes, the part the comment sections are absolutely on fire about. Because the question everybody is asking is the obvious one. Why now? Why, after all these years, after all the warnings, after all the noise about no-fly zones, did 50 Cent choose this exact moment to make that walk? And here is where I am going to give you my read. And I want you to tell me in the comments if you think I am reading this right or if I am reaching. Number 1. The timing relative to Supreme's situation is impossible to ignore. With the reports that Supreme is not getting out early, that the federal government is not budging, that the old power structure of that neighborhood is legally and physically locked in place for the foreseeable future, the street calculus changes dramatically. The threat was always most credible when the infrastructure behind it was intact and active. Right now, that infrastructure is hollowed out. The king is in a cell. The alleged enforcers are either locked up, under surveillance, or wise enough to know that one wrong move on a target this famous means dying in federal custody. 50 Cent is many things, but stupid has never been one of them. If he made that walk, it is because he knew with certainty that the walk was safe. And how he knew that, what conversations happened behind the scenes to make that certain, that is the question that should keep everybody up at night. Number 2. And this is the piece almost nobody is talking about. This move rewrites the entire narrative of the feud for the next generation. Think about it. For 20 years, the story has been told one way by one side. 50 Cent the informant. 50 Cent the outsider. 50 Cent the man who could never come home. That story lived on podcasts, on diss records, and documentaries. It was the one permanent stain his enemies could always point to. He could have all the money in the world, all the hit shows, all the success, and they could always say, but you cannot go back to your own hood. You are banned. You are exiled. Well, what do they say now? He went. He stood there. He fed people. He left. Every single clip of that visit is now permanent, undeniable proof that the exile narrative is dead. He did not just visit a neighborhood. He repossessed the story. And in hip-hop, the story is everything. Number 3, and I need you to sit with this one. This was also a message to the new generation of voices that have been making a name for themselves by talking tough about him online. The podcasters, the street commentators, the self-appointed spokespeople who built entire platforms on promising what would happen to 50 Cent if he ever came back. He answered all of them at once, without saying a single one of their names, without giving them the clout of a direct response. He just showed up, and now every one of them has to explain why nothing happened. Every one of them has to either escalate or quietly walk their talk back. And escalating against a man who just proved he can stand on that block in daylight is a very, very bad idea, and everybody in that world knows exactly why. Now, let me address the other side of this, because I want to be fair and I want to be thorough. There are people, and some of them are in my own comment section right now, who say this whole thing was staged, calculated, that 50 Cent came with security you could not see, that the police knew, that it was all cleared in advance, and there was no real risk at all. And you know what? That might be partly true. He is a smart man. He is a businessman. Of course there was security. Of course there was planning. A man does not survive what he survived by being careless. But here is what that argument misses. Every king who ever returned to contested territory had security. Every general who ever rode through a conquered city had an escort. The security does not diminish the statement. The security is part of the statement. The statement is not "I am invincible." The statement is "I have the resources, the reach, and the confidence to stand here, and there is not a single thing anyone can do about it." That is not recklessness. That is power, exercised quietly and completely. And I also want to talk about what this moment means for Tony Yayo's legacy specifically, because I think it got overlooked. Yayo has spent years being the loyal soldier, the one who carries the flag, the one who shows up on every podcast and keeps the G-Unit story alive for the culture. But loyalty in hip-hop is cheap until it gets tested in a real environment. Anybody can wear the chain at an award show. Standing on that corner, on that specific corner, with that specific history hanging in the air, that is where loyalty gets its receipt. Whatever anyone says about Tony Yayo from this day forward, they can never say he was not there. They can never say he ducked. When the walk got made, he made it. That is etched now. That is history. Let me also put this in historical context, because the young ones watching might not realize how rare this actually is. Hip-hop is full of legends who could never go back. Artists who got big and lost their home base forever. Sometimes because of beef. Sometimes because of envy. Sometimes because the people they came up with never forgave them for leaving. Going back, truly going back, standing still, being received, walking away whole. That is one of the rarest feats in this culture. It almost never happens without security theater, without politics, without somebody's feelings getting hurt. And yet this week, it happened quietly, almost casually, like a man stopping by the store. That casualness is the loudest part of the whole thing. When something that was supposed to be impossible starts looking easy, that tells you the balance of power did not just shift this week. It had already shifted a long time ago, and this week was simply the first time everybody got to see it on camera. And one more layer on the business side, because we cannot forget who we are dealing with. This is the same mind that turned a get rich or die trying story into a film, a soundtrack, a clothing line, a beverage deal that made him one of the wealthiest men in entertainment, and a slate of hit shows that has dominated cable for a decade. Nothing this man does in front of a camera is accidental. Nothing. Every frame is a chess move. So when he lets himself be filmed handing money to a restaurant on his old block, understand that he is not just feeding people. He is feeding a narrative. One where he is the provider, the protector, the son who made good, and the other side is a cautionary tale locked behind glass. He is writing the final chapter of this feud himself, and he is writing it in cash and smiles instead of anything the blogs can twist into a headline about violence. Genius. Cold, calculated, 20 years in the making genius. Now let me bring this all the way around and tell you where I think this goes next, because this story is absolutely not over, and I have a feeling we are watching the first move of something much bigger. But before I get into predictions, let me address the elephant in the room that some of y'all are already typing about. Is this channel glorifying street conflict by covering this? Absolutely not, and I want to be crystal clear about that. Nobody was harmed in this story, and that is precisely why it is worth covering. For once, and I mean for once, we got a hip-hop story with decades of genuine tension behind it where the ending was money in people's pockets and smiles on a block instead of a tragedy on the news. How many times have I had to come on here and tell y'all about a young artist who did not make it home? Too many. So when the culture produces a moment where history, ego, and reputation all pointed towards something terrible, and instead we got generosity and peace, I am going to celebrate that. I am going to analyze it. And I am going to help the young ones watching learn the actual lesson, which is that the ultimate victory is not the other man's downfall. It is standing so far above the conflict that the conflict cannot reach you anymore. Now, with that said, let me tell you where I think this goes next. First, watch what happens with the footage. 50 Cent is a television producer now, one of the most successful in the game. He has built an entire universe of content around the mythology of Queens, around the Supreme Era, around the very streets he just walked. Do you think this does not end up in a documentary? Do you think this footage does not end up opening a season of something? I would bet money that what we saw this week was not just a visit. It was a scene. He is producing his own legacy in real time, and he just shot the most powerful frame of the entire series on the block where it all started. Second, Watch the response from the other side. Or more precisely, watch for the absence of a response. Because here is the dirty little secret of situations like this. When threats get made publicly, and then get tested publicly, and nothing happens, the silence afterward is deafening. The people who talk the loudest now have a choice. They can keep talking and look toothless, or they can go quiet and confirm that the moment has passed. Either way, the power dynamic is now set in stone. 50 Cent did not just win the week. He may have ended a 25-year conversation. Third, and this is the one I really want you to think about, watch what happens in the neighborhood itself. Because beyond the beef, beyond the gossip, something genuinely significant happened for Southside Jamaica this week. The narrative about that neighborhood for decades has been written by outsiders. Violence, drugs, danger, decline. But this week, the most famous person that neighborhood ever produced came back, stood tall, and poured into it. He put money in the hands of a local business owner. He put smiles on the faces of people who rarely get good news. And he did it all on the very ground the world was told he could never touch again. Whatever you think of the man, that is the definition of reclaiming your story. Now, I have been doing this a long time, and I have covered a lot of moments in this culture. I have seen rappers posture. I have seen tough talk. I have seen beefs that were all theater, and I have seen beefs that were tragically real. And I am telling you, from everything I know, what happened this week in Queens is going to be remembered as one of the most quietly gangster moments in hip-hop history. Not because anyone got hurt, thank God. Not because anyone got embarrassed. But because a man walked into the one place on earth where he was supposedly dead if he showed his face. And he showed his face, and the sun kept shining, and the block kept moving, and the only thing that died that day was the myth that anyone else owned those streets. But I want to hear from y'all, because this one is layered, and I know the comments are about to be a war zone. Do you think 50 Cent was brave or reckless for making that walk back to Southside? Do you think the threats were ever real, or was it always just talk? And what do you make of the reports about Supreme allegedly asking for leniency and being told no? Does the power in Queens officially belong to Curtis Jackson now? Or is this story still being written? And while you are down there, I have a question for the historians in the comments, because I know y'all are out there. Where does this moment rank among the great returns in hip-hop history? Because off the top of my head, I cannot think of many times a man with this much money, this much fame, and this much documented danger tied to his name simply strolled back onto a contested block and made it look like a Sunday afternoon. Some of y'all are going to say it does not top the classics. Some of y'all are going to say nothing compares, because nobody else ever had this much on the line. Debate it out below, respectfully, and I will be down there with you. Also, real quick, I need to give a shout out to the workers at that restaurant, because they are the unsung heroes of this whole moment. They stayed open late to feed people coming out of that show. They served their community the way small businesses in our neighborhoods always do, quietly, without applause. And then the most famous son of that community walked through the door and made sure their loyalty was rewarded in front of the whole world. That is the circle. That is how it is supposed to work. The block pours into you, you make it out, and then you come back and pour into the block. If more success stories ended that way, we would be having very different conversations on this channel. And let me tell you one more thing before I get out of here, because I would not be doing my job if I did not point out the bigger picture. This whole saga, from the shooting in 2000 to the feuds to the federal cases to this week's walk home, is ultimately a story about time. Time is the one opponent that never loses. The men who were supposed to be the permanent power of that neighborhood are watching their kingdom from a prison visiting room, watching their hair turn gray, watching the years do what no rival ever could. And the man they marked for death 26 years ago is producing hit television, employing hundreds of people, and walking his old block like a mayor. Time did that. Survival did that. Strategy did that. There is an old saying that you do the time, you do not let the time do you. But I am going to flip it tonight, because what we watched this week was the ultimate proof of the other half of that equation. 50 Cent did his time in the streets, survived it, transcended it, and came back to claim it. And the people who swore he would never return, they are watching the return from exactly where time has put them, and there is not one thing they can do about it except watch. Now, if you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications, because I am telling you right now, this Queen's story has more chapters coming, and when the next development drops, and it will drop, You're going to want to be here the moment I break it down. We are also going to be getting into the full untold history of the Supreme Team era and how it connects to everything happening in hip-hop today. And trust me, you have never heard it told the way I am about to tell it. Like this video if you think 50 Cent made the power move of the year. Share it with somebody who needs to understand what real chess looks like. And I will see you in the comments, because this conversation is just getting started. And to my day one subscribers who have been rocking with me, y'all already know how we do it. We do not just chase the headline. We dig into the history. We read the court documents. We separate the street talk from the verified facts, and we tell you which is which. That is why this community is different, and that is why this channel keeps growing. So if this is your first video here, go back and watch the deep dives, because the context will change how you see everything happening in the culture right now. One last thing, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Whatever neighborhood you are from, whatever block raised you, whatever odds were stacked against you when you started, remember this image. A man they said could never come home, standing in the sun on his own corner, feeding his own people, fearing nothing. That could be your story. That can be anybody's story. Survival first. Strategy always. And never, ever let anybody else write the ending of your story for you. Not the haters. Not the internet. Not the history books. You write it. You walk it. You own it. And because I know some of y'all skipped straight to the end, let me leave you with the one-sentence version of everything we covered tonight. They said the corner was closed. They said the door was locked. They said the king could never come home. He came home anyway. He came home smiling. And he came home with his hands full of blessings for the same people who watched him crawl before he ever walked. Queens, stand up. Southside, stand tall. The whole world just watched history get rewritten on a sidewalk, and the pen was a stack of $100 bills. Now get in those comments. Tell me where you were when you first heard that 50 Cent touchdown back home. And do not forget to subscribe, because the next chapter of this story is already being written, and I will have it for you first. That is the real tea tonight, and it is piping hot. I am gone. And listen, I know how this culture moves. I know the second this video drops, somebody is going to clip a piece of it and run it back on another platform with no context. So let me say this part slowly, for the clip watchers. This is not about celebrating a beef. This is about celebrating the end of one. There is a difference, and if you cannot see the difference, you were never listening in the first place. What 50 Cent did this week was close a door that has been open for over 2 decades, and he closed it without a single act of violence, without a single threat, without a single headline that a family somewhere has to grieve over. In a culture where we have buried far too many young kings over far less, that deserves to be studied, not just scrolled past. I also want to go back to something I said earlier, because it deserves its own moment. The people on that block, the elders who came up to dap him up, the young people with their phones out, the workers smiling ear to ear, every single one of them understood the assignment without being told. They knew they were standing inside history. Some of those elders watched Curtis Jackson grow up. Some of them probably remember him before the fame, before the bulletproof vests, before the world knew his name. And to see that same man come back as a giant, not hiding, not rushing, not looking over his shoulder, that is the kind of moment a neighborhood carries for generations. That is the kind of story a grandfather on that block is going to tell his grandkids. I was there the day 50 Cent came home, and nobody can ever take that away from them. So when the next chapter of this story drops, and it will drop, remember everything we laid out tonight. Remember the timing. Remember the silence. Remember the ledger. And remember that in this culture, the loudest statement is almost never the one made on a record. It is the one made standing still, in the sun,